This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Alright, let's get to the chase. Most of us actually want to make money from the indie games we're working on, right? Now maybe for some of you first getting started, making money isn't a huge priority. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. And I really think that's a healthy mindset to have. But I also find that spending hundreds of hours developing a game that nobody ends up being interested in or buys is heartbreaking. As devs, we have so many questions of what we did wrong and how we could do it better next time. And believe me, I've experienced that a lot and it's not a great feeling. So instead of blindly stumbling around the dark and trying to figure out how to sell your game, I figured I would just compile a list of things that I've learned over the past 10 years of doing it. Now let me clarify, I'm no full-time game designer, I'm no Toby Fox, and as always, this is my personal opinion and my personal experiences. So if you had something different or disagree, that's perfectly fine. Just take everything with a grain of salt. Now, obviously, the first thing you need to sell your game is a good game. And I'm not going to touch on this too much because I think there's a lot of videos that already do a great job explaining this. But what I will say, and this applies to other things in life as well, is to find a niche genre or topic. For example, one of the first projects that my studio Fearth worked on was a side-scroller MMORPG called Fantasy World. I actually did a whole video on it and you can check it out here if you're interested. And the thing about side-scrolling MMORPGs is that there aren't that many, especially as indie titles. And after releasing one video, we started to get a bunch of new users to the game, and 4 years later, some of them are still around to this day. Heck, Rybread is one of our top Patreon supporters. Love you, dude. And the surprising thing about all this is that Fantasy World was an extremely buggy game. Basically, what I'm saying is, if you pick a genre that's less saturated, there's a chance that people will be able to find your game more easily. But I know you're still wondering, Goodgis, how and where do we sell our games? And that's a great question. But first, a word from today's sponsor, Squarespace. Making your own website or online store can be a huge pain in the butt from scratch. Believe me, I've done it many times before. And the best way to cut the hassle is to use Squarespace. From selling your products online, making a portfolio or gallery of your work, or even something as tedious as image scaling is so much easier and saves you so much time with Squarespace. As the internet expands, I truly believe that everyone should have internet real estate, but creating your own website doesn't mean you have to be disconnected from social media. With Squarespace, you can connect your social profiles so that way you can instantly post on different platforms, making it fantastic and easy to post your new product or game. Make sure to go check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready, you're all set to launch, go to squarespace.com/Goodgis to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So you finally finished your game. You've been developing it for the past couple months and you're really excited for people to see it and to buy it. But where do they go to buy it? Now, in my opinion, I think there's three main options. The first is Steam, and I think it's one of the most effective ways to sell your game. And what's great about it is Steam really likes to push your project. You'll find that you'll actually get a decent amount of wish list per week if you have a decently designed page. It is a little bit of work, especially because you have to design a nice page and there's a lot of requirements, but I think that's what makes it more curated and better to sell your game on. And most of the indie devs are actually making money from their games are selling on Steam. But say you're just getting started and you don't want to get too caught up in the fussiness of trying to market your game or even pay a $100 fee. Maybe you're worried that your game won't even make $100. Then definitely the number one place I recommend is itch.io. It's free and it's extremely easy to release new games, and you can even decide how much of a cut that they take from your profit. Whereas Steam has that 30% cut that can be steep for some people. But one thing I'll say about itch is because it's free, so many people have their games on there, and it's very rare for people to actually pick up and buy your game organically. I'd recommend putting your game up here if you're not too worried about how much money you're making, or if you have an audience that you can direct there. One of our games, Whizbirds, got a couple donations while we were developing it, but most of the money that we've made on itch has been directed straight from this channel. The third place to sell your game is on a console. What's great about a console is there's less competition, there's less games on the system for you to compete with. It's basically like Steam, but normally with a much steeper cost, as if you're porting your game, it can be thousands of dollars. So I only really recommend this method if you have a Kickstarter or if your game is selling extremely well on Steam. You can also sell games in the mobile market, but it's extremely competitive and I don't have enough experience for me to actually speak on that personally. But everything I've mentioned so far really doesn't matter as much as this final point. And that's how to spread the word about your game. You have to think about that the internet is like a bunch of people yelling in a room, and whoever's loudest gets to sell their product. After a while, people try to figure out a way to sound even louder, so they buy megaphones, and some people invest a lot of money in buying huge amps so they can blast their voice. And that's social media in a nutshell. Everyone wants to grow their following and to sell their product, but the problem is you're competing with big companies that have lots of money. And I think sometimes we think that the internet is pretty organic and you can just stumble upon things. things, and that maybe used to be the case, but it certainly isn't the case anymore. Fear not, there are a couple ways that you can get past this and make your voice heard. The first is kind of a double whammy, and that's Kickstarter. And what's great about it is people go to Kickstarter looking for new games, and especially games that they can support and be a part of the community. And another great thing about it is you can actually build a community through it, whether it's a Discord or a channel where you make updates, and that's the start of your brand to help you sell your games in the future. Now, another good way to start marketing for your game is to go to conventions or do online networking. I'm just saying it's a lot easier to sell your game or talk about your idea if you're around people and they get to know you. An important part of selling your product is about having that relationship, because ultimately here you're not trying to just get numbers, you're trying to get people that are passionate and that love your game. Ultimately, relationships are some of the most important things we can get in this life. And finally, and one of the most explosive ways that you can sell your game is by telling your story on social media. If I'm being honest, most of the games that I've sold have been because of YouTube and the amazing people like you guys that have watched and supported me. And I know that this can kind of seem like a frustrating point for people because not everyone has success, and I've been incredibly lucky to grow my channel, especially as fast as I have. But the truth of the matter is that most of you guys are much more talented than I am when it comes to making games and making art. And I believe that each and every one of you can have some sort of successful way to market your game. And if you don't like editing videos, then just post your photos on the game you're working on Twitter, and you'll find that people will start to get excited about your game. But regardless of what platform that you use, you should always keep this in mind. Make sure to show off work that you're proud of, teach a skill that you've learned, make a joke that would make someone's day, but most importantly, just be kind. I can't tell you how many nasty comments I've received over the past year so far, and I'm sure there will be many more down the road. And it's always important that you respond with maturity, because you never know what that person is going through. And when you do find that success, you'll know that you got it the honest and true way and not by bullying or just teasing and mocking other people. So that's it. Those are my tips on how to actually sell your game, and this is what I did to sell mine. I know it can be extremely hard marketing your game, but that's just because it takes time. It took me over 10 years for me to have a successful channel on YouTube to even talk about this stuff. And most of the overnight successes we like to talk about actually took years to make. And if you don't have fun doing that, then why are you even doing it in the first place? Let me know your thoughts about these tips, or if you've had any others that have really benefited you. And before we go, a huge shout out to Skides, Heath Sargent, and Rybread, and the rest of the fantastic Patreon supporters who continue to make these videos possible. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time for another Game Dev Adventure.